Hello, friends, and welcome to Service of Change's Changecast, your podcast for change. I'm your host, Dennis Nappy II, with Service of Change, where small changes among the masses can have a massive impact around the world. There is so much going on in the world tonight. CIA torture reports. We're still seeing backlash from Ferguson and from New York. There's a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to be discussing the conspiracy within the conspiracy. Are people being misled and manipulated with these things that are going around? Into that, I want to bring on partner in crime, the internet provocateur, Joel Schaefer. What's going on, dude?
Hey Dennis, it's good to be with you. Good to be on the air. I'm
Definitely is, my friend.
I'm like you. I'm excited and scared and riled up, and at the same time, I got a sense of calm about the things that are going on too, because I believe in the essential goodness of human beings, and I think that we all can individually and together make a difference.
I agree. And I think that in a lot of ways, people are kind of, because they're so upset and they're so emotional, and because of what's being shown on TV. I'm hoping it seems a lot worse than it is.
Mm.
But perception is reality for a lot of people, and that's kind of what I want to get into and talk about tonight. But before we get into the real heavy stuff, and anything exciting going on with you?
I'm just doing my standard thinking and writing and provoking,
Provoking, getting in some
provoking, yeah, a
debates
little
on the internet.
provocation. I've been writing a book, to write a book, and I wrote a
Right.
little in that book today, so that was exciting. It kind of drained me
Yeah.
writing
Yeah.
about my ancestors.
It's a draining process, man. It really
Yeah,
is. Healthy though. It's a healthy process.
it is, and I think I put some. There's some good stuff I was able to put out on the page, but it's a daily grind, and a lot of times with everything
Right.
else going on in my life, I don't always have time to sit down and
I
do it.
hear you. But as a writer, you'll make the time if it's your passion. I remember when, after 5 years of working on my book, I said, I'm done. I need to get this thing finished. So I used to get up. My son was like maybe 3 months old. So I was already not sleeping much. I was back at work. I think I had to be in work by 7. So I was getting up at like 4:30 to edit for an hour every morning just to get it done and out, out the door. And it happened. It went out, So you'll find the time and, be ready when it's ready.
Thank you.
But speaking of writing, I got some exciting things going on. Lori Latimer's haiku book. It's a bunch of, she does the haikus day for change every week, and she gives us some inspirational 575 haikus. I'm sorry, we discovered that haiku is the plural of haiku, so she gives us some inspirational haiku every week. Service of Change is publishing, some of her work, and the book looks, I've seen a digital copy. We ordered the proofs to kind of review it and stuff, and it looks amazing. I'm so excited for this project. Lori's real excited about it, so we're gonna get Lori back on the show at some point when we get closer to, the actual launch date of this. But stay tuned, and I encourage you, our listeners out there, please go to serviceofchange.com and click on, I think the link says Haikus Day. And you know what? I should try to throw a link up in the right-hand side of our screen in our showcase. I'll try and get a link up there today. But if not, just go to servicechange.com, click on Haikus Day in the top menu, and it'll bring you right to Lori's page. Talks a little bit about her book, and there's a spot where you can subscribe to her mailing list. And please do that because there's going to be promotional stuff going on and more information about the book. So I highly recommend it. And one more writer that we've worked with this week, a friend of mine, Keith Green. I want to give a shout out to Keith. He published an article for us at serviceofchange.com, and Keith is the moderator, the owner of Your Green America, and he wrote an article about the root. Keith thinks kind of like we do. Let's stop looking at the cause and let's start looking at, or let's stop looking at the symptom and start looking at the cause of the problem. And he wrote a real good article about the Federal Reserve and how that's basically the root of all evil, that manipulates a lot of the problems that we have going on here. So shout out to Keith. His website's up on the right hand side if you're watching live in the showcase, Your Green America. If not, it's yourgreenamerica.com, and he's going to have some. It's a newer site, but he's going to have some good things coming up. He's got some video blogs and some good articles that are going to be coming up. So check him out, yourgreenamerica.com. So Some good stuff going on, Joel. I love that our community seems to be growing as people are reaching out saying, hey, I have, I'd like to share this and I'd like to work on this, and it's all positive stuff, I think, and I'm really pleased with that, you know.
Yeah, that's the way it's going to work. It's going to work through networks, through groups of
Yep,
people.
that's just it. And if we really want to make a change, that's how we do it. It's through networking and it's through the positive stuff, and that's what people are sharing. If you have ideas, if you want to write for Service to Change, please just want to do one article. That's great. Hey, hit me up. Joel will tell you, and if I'd like to have Keith on. He'll tell you. I mean, I help with editing, and just getting it ready to go out. I mean, I enjoy working with other minds and seeing people's ideas and stuff, and that's how we grow. If you want to come on the show and talk about it, excellent. We're always looking for guests. So hit us up, servicetochange.com. There's links there. You can hit me up on Twitter, Dennis Nappy II, Nappii, or at facebook.com/servicetochange. And there's always our email address, service@serviceofchange.com. So a lot of good stuff going on, though. We're really excited about everything that's happening right now. So what do you think, Joel? Should we get into this? I've been
Let's get into it.
yeah, I've been excited about this for a while. Thinking about it. Things that I'm seeing. Maybe part of this is just I guess my warped mind from my experience in the military, working in counterintelligence. You're trained to always think that there's a hidden agenda, and intel with this guy. Can you trust this guy? Is this guy a double agent? All that type of spy stuff. And I sometimes wonder, am I making this stuff up in my head because I'm just trying to hold on to a life that I once lived and it's not really there? But then some things I can't shake. So I want to talk about the conspiracy within the conspiracy and really look at what people call the truth movement today, and what's now turning into what looks like the revolution, quote unquote, that's going on as stemming most recently from Ferguson and from New York, and who knows what's going to come internationally from the CIA report that just came out. So I want to talk a little bit about that tonight.
Yeah, and like listening to you talk
Get
about
into it. So.
listening to you talk about your experiences in counterintelligence, like one of the things that came to my mind was like the most recent philosophy is called postmodern philosophy, and postmodern philosophy basically says that the truth is pretty relative. So what they say is that most truth comes from an account. It comes from a narrative. It comes from a story. And I think maybe you can confirm this, that those who tell the best stories, or those stories that make the most sense, those who control the narratives, are, especially around issues that are abstract. When you're talking about a 300 million person strong nation and a 7 billion strong person world, if you're talking about things that involve all of them or even just a fraction of those people, you're necessarily going into the abstract. So that leaves a lot of room to tell stories that, even if they're not openly dishonest, they might be so oversimplified. They might be such a result of stepping so far back from the picture that you can't see the details. And and then you have multiple narratives clashing up against each other. And to really unpack that and really look at the stories within the stories, it's difficult, and it takes an open mind, and it takes some critical thinking. And so that's my initial contribution to what we want to talk about tonight.
Right, and there's so many versions of those stories, and there's so and you start getting into information and disinformation, and then people who are debunking quote unquote things. I mean, these are all terms I follow. I enjoy looking into what they call conspiracy theories, and I hate that term conspiracy theorist means you're a lunatic, because I think and I'm not going to give my opinions on what I think is true and what I don't think is true tonight. I just kind of want to talk generally, but I do think there is some truth behind some of that stuff. A lot, some stuff that comes out is awesome, but what goes through my head is when I was taught how to lie. I mean, I went through a course, and they said, part of that course was, here's how you lie. You tell the truth, and you work that lie into a fabric of truth.
Sure.
So they don't really know where the lie is. They don't really realize it. So I think though that this truth movement, I think is is part of the agenda. And here's what I'm going to use. And a lot of people, if you don't follow conspiracy theorists, I still think this, you're going to be able to connect to a lot of this information. If you do follow it, the conversation is going to be on a different level for you. And I'm going to start with, talking about a movie that a lot of conspiracy theorists, reference and use, and that's the Matrix trilogy. There's a lot of that movie's one big metaphor for a lot of different things, for government, for religion, for a lot of things that are going on in the world today. And I find a lot of inspiration in that movie. But in the second Matrix movie, and I'm going to explain why I'm bringing up this quote here. But in the second Matrix movie, somewhat of a spoiler alert, but it's old enough now, so you can whatever close your ears if you don't want to hear it. But at the end of that movie, Neo goes and he meets with who's called the architect, and that guy is basically God. He designed everything. He created the Matrix. And I'm going to read two quotes from that scene briefly. And he says, "Your life is the sum of a remainder of an unbalanced equation inherent to the programming of the Matrix. You are the eventuality of an anomaly, which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision. What remains is a burden to sedulously avoid it. It is not unexpected and thus not beyond a measure of control, which has led you inexorably here. Please, as I was saying, and then later in the conversation, he says, as I was saying, she stumbled upon a solution whereby nearly 99.9% of all test subjects accepted the program as long as they were given a choice, even if they were only aware of the choice at a near unconscious level. While this answer functioned, it was obviously fundamentally flawed, thus creating the otherwise contradictory systematic anomaly that, if left unchecked, might threaten the system itself. Ergo, those that refuse the program, while a minority, if unchecked, will constitute an escalating probability of disaster." I know that was a long, it seemed a lot shorter in the movie than it was to read it, but there you go. My point in sharing that is basically at the end of that movie it was saying the whole conspiracy of the Matrix, everything they were saying, everything that they were uncovering, their whole truth movement was a deception. It was planned. The enemy had put this information out there and said, hey, the Oracle, who was a part of the system, who's feeding these guys information, who believed she was working for the good guys, was really just another system of control. It was designed to identify who the revolutionaries were and further control them. They knew what they were going to do, and they geared it that way. And I just want if you're listening to this in a later date, or our one viewer, thank you for listening. For listening now, to think about that. What's the possibility? Because if these conspiracy theories are true, what's the possibility that these people that are following the truth movement are being misled? Was that clear, Joel? I don't know. I kind of get long.
I think it was.
Okay.
I definitely think it was that. Yeah, you could.
And
You get a little scrap of something dangled out there.
mm-hmm.
It's like it's bait. It's like a fisherman, and put a worm
Right.
on a hook.
And to those that are out there listening, listening to the live show, we have a question and answer feature. Just go to the Google link. I think even on YouTube you can put some question and answers too. We're still figuring this technology out, but they should show up in our chat box live. So there's like a short delay, but we could be able to get to your questions or comments, as we're broadcasting live. So that'd be a pretty awesome feature if you have anything to say or add to this. But I go into the Matrix and that deception because I think it kind of holds on to a lot of what I want to talk about tonight. So let's look at these conspiracy theories basically, and what let's call it conspiracy theory lore is. There's two big theories or two big goals of it, and what the conspiracy theory, what it breaks down to basically after we get through all the fluff, is that there is a secret government that rules the world, and they refer to that as the Illuminati. And you hear that, you hear it in hip hop music today. You hear it in all your conspiracy theory shows. A lot of authors have written about it, and they say that this organization has two goals. They want a one world government and a one world religion. So the truth movement, the idea is to expose these people for who they are and what their agenda is, and then to rebel against them and prevent this from coming about. Now, my fear after what I started seeing back in June when the police officers started being killed in Las Vegas and in Canada, and then more recently with Eric Frein, and then now what's going on, the protests in Ferguson and in New York. What's scaring me is that this seems more like part of the plan. That's my fear, is that what people are doing, their reaction to the truth that they're being given, to the illumination that they're being shown, is what this organization wants anyway. Because if that organization exists and they want this one world government, well, what's a better way to do it than to cause the people to revolt and uprise and then have to step in and use force to bring them down. You know what I'm saying?
I do, and like what I saw that disturbed me about a lot of the reactions to the police misconduct, and also even to what just the reaction to what just got released in terms of how the CIA used enhanced interrogation tactics and or torture, whatever you want to use, is that it seemed like it's like the system or the government or the powers that be or whoever it is, they're looking for fall guys rather
Hmm.
than, because they see that the people might really be questioning like our drug laws, like questioning the fact that like we have police departments that are becoming agents for their local governments to like for a patronage system that where people get good jobs like in the courthouse and all the fine money goes to them, and then to question the fact that we're still involved in the Middle East at all when we should have probably never been involved in the first place, or if we were going to be involved we should have done it in a more moral way where we don't like support Saudi Arabia who beheads people and won't let women drive and
Hmm.
persecutes gay people, but then we attack ISIS for saying all the same, essentially having the same ideology. And so it's easy to be like, oh, well, we're good, just those torturing CIA people are good. And police are
Hmm.
okay, it's just those racist cops are the problem.
Hmm. And it's a bigger problem, and they're
It
I
is.
always say they're symptoms. They're symptoms of a greater problem. And right now, they're an opportunity, and it looks like they tried to do the same thing with the Trayvon Martin issue, is to pump it up and to hype it up and to get people to kind of riot into the streets, But what I keep saying is when you use violence and those tactics to fight those tactics, you're not going to win. You're going to just bring more violence upon yourself. And if you want to protest, that is your right. And I just challenge all our protesters out there to think about what your goal is. Why are you protesting? Is it just because you're mad and you want to be heard? That's great. Just be careful with the confrontational situations that you are creating right now, because I really think that looking at modern history, look at Egypt, look at Syria, look at Greece, look at Libya, look at Taiwan, and now look at the United States. You've got civil unrest popping up all over the place, and it's like it's following a script. And then what happens? Oh, we got to step in, we got to send NATO, we got to bomb them, we got to, more militarization, more police, because somebody gets the people all riled up over multiple issues, and then the people rile up, and then they're stomped down. And it's going to take a lot more in America to do that. But again, the American people are being built up, I think, to prepare them for that when they don't have to go that way. And that's my frustration. That's kind of what I want to explore tonight in some of the reference points that I've come up with. I mean, let's look at if you follow conspiracy theory, then you've heard of Jordan Maxwell. He's kind of one of the godfathers of a lot of this stuff. But one of the things he talks about is the manipulation that Hollywood uses, and TV and movies have a lot of influence. I mean, look at me. I'm sitting here quoting The Matrix. It's a creation of Hollywood. But Jordan Maxwell goes in to talk about how Hollywood's tied into this whole thing, and how Hollywood basically comes from a term based on the Druid priests back, hundreds, thousands of years ago. When they would perform their magical rituals, they would use a magic wand, and that wand was fashioned out of a holly tree. So you have the holly wood to create magic, and you hear movie magic all the
And our
time
word
coming out of.
holy is related to that too.
Yes, yes, you're right, Holly and Holy. So there's some tie-ins, and Jordan Maxwell does a lot of research on the origins of words. And when you really start looking at where does words come from, you can start to kind of notice patterns and stuff. And you're like, wow, that's just too shocking to be a coincidence with certain things. And stay with me, if you're listening to this, look at everything that's being thrown at the American people right now. Okay, you have a one of the most popular shows on TV is what? The Walking Dead. Okay, it's a show about survival, about the zombie apocalypse. The enemy's coming. Arm yourself. Get ready for Armageddon. You've got Doomsday Preppers, which is all about, well, when we go to World War III, or some people say when the government takes over, when the police state happens. It's a show geared towards preparing for catastrophe, preparing for civil war, basically. Or, everybody has a theme of, what am I going to do when civil unrest happens? That's the biggest fear on that show. And when you watch that show, I look at that show, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to go get more bullets. I'm not ready. That's what always goes through my head on the times that I watch that show until I take a step back. Other popular movies that are out there, The Hunger Games, man. That's all great movie. I love the movie. I watch that movie, I want to go join the revolution. There's not that level of a revolution going on right now, but I watch the movie, I get that feeling inside of me. Stand up, fight the man, fight the power. And that has such an influence that actually in Taiwan right now, there are people who are being arrested because they're holding up the three fingers in silent protest. They're just standing there during sit-ins and stuff. They hold up their three fingers, which is a symbol from the Hunger Games of the revolution. So, that movie is inspiring actual revolution. You had this whole zombie apocalypse movement, and the CDC, tongue-in-cheek, I don't think the CDC really thinks zombies are going to come take over the United States, but they created a how to survive a zombie apocalypse manual, and the idea was to get people interested and entertained for emergency preparedness, which is important, but again, it's emphasizing that, and then more recently the movie World War Z. I love the movie, Brad Pitt's movie. It's a great movie. At the very end of that movie, it says, if you can fight, fight. Our war has just begun. So people are being bombarded with some stuff in the fictional realm, some stuff in the nonfiction realm, and then it's being reinforced by what we're seeing on the news. And then you have certain media programs, certain news broadcasts that are calling for revolution, that are talking about the police takeover, the police state. And anytime something happens or a cop does something, they're blowing it up on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on their own, radio network channels. And I'm going to get into some of their quotes a little bit later. But there's millions of people that are listening to this going, yes, the revolution is coming. I need to be ready. And what I'm saying is, although you may be getting truth, you may be waking up, because that's the big thing now. They say, wake up. You have to wake up. I'm waking people up. I look at it, if I'm going to quote another movie here, if you've ever seen the movie Inception, I think you're still waking up in a dream. I think somebody is going in and planting an idea in your mind, and that idea is you need to prepare for a revolution, and you need to be ready to fight for your freedom. And I think that when these people are waking up and are going, oh my gosh, look at all this truth. Yes, we have to fight. No, you're being lied to. You're being given truth, but you're also that truth is being used to manipulate you.
I see this in subtler ways, but I see it too. And it's so interesting for me because, like, I grew up reading my parents' left-wing, counterculture, revolutionary literature to talk about revolution. And this is stuff that came out of the 60s and the 70s. A lot of it had to do with black liberation, had to do with workers' rights, and it had to do with women's rights and all this stuff. And they were coming out of an era where we were kind of like a Puritan Christian country, and before the advent of birth control for women, like if you had a child out of wedlock, you could be shamed out of your community.
Right.
Like, we lived in segregated communities. The list goes on and on. If you were a failure, economically, often you were called a bum or a loser or stupid. So therefore, you weren't a victim necessarily of the economy if there was no jobs or you didn't get a good education. We were coming from a pretty oppressive society, so a lot of that stuff was like an antidote to that. It was like a breath of fresh air. But now you fast forward 30 years later from when a lot of those texts were written, and our society has been transformed in a lot of positive ways. And what I see is some of the same rhetoric that acts like, and it's not to say that some of these problems aren't still there, that there's not still sexism, not still racism, not still struggles for workers in an unpredictable economy. It's just that a lot of the rhetoric seems to be and I see it being used by people that aren't really there. They don't really want equal rights for people or want better conditions for workers. They want to galvanize a certain element of people, like maybe black people or people that identify with these causes,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to rush them up against the people like the normal white people, white men. And so
Mm-hmm.
I made a really interesting observation, and a lot of people thought I was crazy, but I was watching Sons of Anarchy, and Sons of Anarchy has a white main character, and I'm like, well, in the end of the show, he dies. He can't survive. Like he is a doomed character. And I'm trying to think about who are the white male heroes. I mean, we're a white male society. That's what they say, and we're majority white, and for the most of our history, white men were the leaders and the rulers.
Mm-hmm.
And was very hard pressed to find some white male heroes that are still being portrayed.
You mean
And
modern day? You mean?
yeah, right now. Like as heroes. And I said we'd still have soldiers who are heroes, but I think that's because we know how hard it is and what they have to go through. So and we also don't want to necessarily deal with the problems that war presents. So we kind of glorify the warriors to make ourselves feel better. Not that they don't deserve the glory in the first place, and not that some of that gratitude isn't genuine, because I think it is. But I think a lot of it has to do with we're just appalled by what we send them into, so we're like, we'll give them credit. So you still have heroes portrayed who are soldiers, but cops are being attacked. Cops, the image of a cop who is mostly in this country white, young, and male is being attacked. That doesn't mean that there aren't. That doesn't mean people will say that I think that it's only one direction. That only white male cops are victims. That everything's the other way. That it's nice. It's good to be a black person now. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that there can be there's counter movements going on. And in other words, there's some factions, some forces, some power groups that want to, and they come through Hollywood that want to push a certain agenda. And perhaps they're still mad because for so long, you know, if you look at the way blacks and women were portrayed in the media, even as late as the 80s, it was like you'd have a good black guy on a TV show. And that would be like subtly like it's like one of those compliments is kind of like an insult wrapped up.
Right.
It's like you look good today. You know what I mean? What are you
Chris
saying?
Rock says it. Like I ain't never been to jail. It's a Chris Rock does a good job of bringing that to light.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So it was like you had token black people. So it was like that guy's really an articulate black guy. Like it's Sidney Poitier and then Bill Cosby.
Right. And it's
so
an insult.
some of that anger is justified, but there's this pushback, and I think to jump on what you're saying, I think that the powers that be they want to divide and conquer.
Absolutely, that's it right there. That's you nailed it. You hit the nail on the head.
So they want to burn. They want to deface our heroes.
And I want
my heroes. I'm a white man, and so I'm going to identify not always, but sometimes with white men. And my heroes are being attacked. And what do I want to do? I want to defend them. So I go on social media and I start defending white people and start getting angry when I see I see a lot of people saying white people are this or white people are that, and I get offended. And maybe I should get offended, but by getting offended, I'm falling into the trap that you talked about.
That's it, right there, and that's what this agenda wants. Because here's how I look at it, from on a larger scale. I posted a video on the Facebook page, our Service to Change Facebook page, and it was basically about our enslavement. Race doesn't matter. The enslavement of the human race. How we're slaves to banks and corporations, basically, and we have this illusion of freedom. And there's a lot of people, that talk about this. Bill Cooper was big on talking about that, and even Michael Tessarian has gotten into some of this. The illusion of the freedom that we think that we have, but really we're not. They're just giving us a little bit, but they are controlling us in ways that we don't even understand, or that we're failing to see, I should say. And I want to talk, for a minute, a reference during World War II in the concentration camps. They had what they called, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they were called capos. And the capos were Jews who were treated just a little bit better than the majority of the other prisoners. And they became the enforcers of their own people. So they were prisoners, but they were enforcing, the rules, because they would get maybe extra food or a little bit, and maybe warmer clothing. They wouldn't, take the beatings that everybody else was taking. And then those in control didn't have to do all that dirty work. And that's exactly what's happening here. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, I don't care what race you are, we are in this together. And that's what I keep saying. It's okay if you have a disagreement. It's okay if you're not a fan of certain cultural norms. That's fine. The problem is those levels of discomfort are being turned into rage against one another, and we're fighting amongst ourselves when we need to stop looking at each other as the enemy and realize, let's look out there. And again, Hunger Games reference. Right when they went into the second one, they said, remember who the real enemy is. It's not each other. And right now, you know, black white is I think is stemming out of the police issue, but you see a lot of white protesters in there in solidarity, and I think that's fantastic. So the new enemy now is law enforcement, who's been the extended arm now of really of this agenda, and we're being pitted against each other because cops are doing what cops are trained to do, and citizens are reacting from that because, well, it's a tough job being a cop, and we've been into this a thousand times. Cops act a certain way because they're afraid for their safety, and I'm not justifying anything. Again, I'm not taking sides on this, but nobody's saying how can we fix this. We're just butting heads right now, and we're taking to the streets. And by taking the streets, by shutting down traffic, you may be spreading awareness, but you're creating conflict. What else can you do? And I'll get into this more at the end of the show. Instead of doing something that's going to be confrontational, yes, it feels good. You're mad, you're upset, you're hurt. You have every right to feel that way. But use that passion, that feeling, that emotion for something productive. If not, you're being played. That's straight up what I'm going to say. Is a lot of people are being played right now when they're out there getting into all of this.
And as much as I'm like empathetic coming from my background for like the struggle of black Americans, and I would never say that racism is totally gone because it's definitely not. But what scares me most about that element of it is that it seems like people are just are woefully ignorant of history. And you can look at like a couple examples. I think I was telling you about one in Liberia. Well, Liberia was settled by freed slaves in 1847. Well, their descendants, they were black people. They oppressed, and they were the elites. They had all the good jobs, and they oppressed everybody else that were actually Africans. Well, one group, one tribe of Africans overthrew them, executed a bunch of them, and then they started mistreating another tribe. And then this guy, Charles Taylor, he comes in, and so it's like one corrupt group of people, or I would say people doing corrupt things, is replaced by another group of people doing corrupt things. And then the third wave that is coming on the backs of two, he's the worst of all three. He had he had soldiers at the age of 12. He was feeding drugs, and they would cut open pregnant women and make bets on the gender of the baby inside.
Yeah, they do some messed up things over there.
And to think that there's this idea that somehow because an oppressed people have been oppressed, that's automatically going to make them righteous. That therefore that they won't be capable of doing such things because they know what it's like to be under the foot of oppression. And in fact, history says that the opposite is true. The Puritans came from some of the worst oppression in England, and they came over here and burned people alive for being different than their religion. The oppressed become like their oppressors. So it's very dangerous stuff to start talking about white people this and white people that. Just like it's dangerous stuff to be like all black people are one way. The way that we used to talk about, not we, but our society used to talk about black people.
Yeah, and you know, in America, you know, it's a very sore subject, and it's a very sensitive subject, and I've seen a lot of people openly now saying, as a result of this, in regards to race, we need to have a conversation, black and white alike, and I have the utmost respect for that, and I think that's what we need to do. We need to take the sting, we need to take the discomfort out of racism. We need to be able to have that discussion because it is an uncomfortable topic because everybody's afraid they're going to offend somebody, they're going to say something offensive, and a lot of times when you're nervous, you don't know what to say, you end up saying something you don't really mean sometimes because you're trying so hard not to say that one, you know what I mean, that one thing. So I think that's a good takeaway from this because I think more people are getting ready or willing to have that discussion and bring it to the table. With that being said, I agree that there is a whole greater perspective, but in America we're so hyper-focused on us, on America, and there's still a lot of pain and there's a lot of healing that needs to happen within aspects of black culture, I think, from everything that's gone on, because it hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of misrepresentation. And our friend Dr. Vibe, he talked about when he got into podcasting, as you mentioned earlier, is because he didn't like the way black men were portrayed in the media and on TV. So I think that definitely does exist in the U.S., but I think you bring up a very good point, is that this is a global issue, and it's not all just black and white. There's a lot of different cultures that have been oppressed for a lot of different reasons. And at the end of the day, I still think that, in some of these situations, it's because of money. One group has the money and the power, the other does not, and the one group uses that oppressed group to make the money for them, and then they steal it from them. So that's the greater problem.
And that's happened in every society, and I don't want to argue that it's inevitable. As a lot of conservative people think that's just the nature of the world, so they don't believe necessarily in human improvement or improvement in morality. And actually, history shows us that we have become more moral and we have become more humane over time. But there's this idea that comes from the left, and it comes from a really bad experience when you had the British Empire and then America, who replaced the British Empire, and you had colonialism, and then you had neo-colonialism, which was imperialism. And so the face of the most recent empire was a white European face. And that's true. I mean, that's just unmistakably true. But if you go back in history, the Muslims, after Muhammad, had one of the biggest empires. I just listened to a podcast about Genghis Khan. He actually had the biggest land empire in the history of the world, and brutal tactics. So it becomes dangerous to associate. I see people saying, and I think the elites like this. They like this because they don't really fear, even if they are white. I don't think, I mean, maybe some of them don't like. I don't want to talk about them in one way, but I think the most current batch of elites, they tend to be multicultural, and they represent the power figures that are global, and you're going to have every color involved in that. Every color, you're going to have people, and you're going to have these capos that you talked about. You're going to have middle management, so to speak, in every continent, who are every shade and hue who are involved in this. And they kind of like it because it distracts, like you said, it distracts people from the reality that we need to change the way that we relate to each other as human beings on an individual and community level first. And so when we talk about, I don't know if you hear it, but I hear it because I read about it and I see it. There's this idea that European white men are inherently savages. We're inherently more immoral than any other group of people that has ever emerged in this world. And that's what they believe. And they have all sort of historical evidence to provide it. And if that's not racism, I don't know what is. But see, once again, even right now, I'm starting to get defensive because I'm a white man. So,
right, and you have a right to be upset about that, because you're sitting there going, well, that's not you.
yeah.
And that's the same thing that, they used to put out about the black man.
Yeah.
They used to say he's a savage. They used to have scientific studies that say, oh, he's of lesser intelligence. And we know today that's not the case. So, but what's happening is that you're demonizing, quote unquote, the enemy. But the problem is the enemy has been made us, our brothers and our sisters, and that's the biggest problem, and talking about this.
Well,
go ahead.
The enemy is within us too, to a large extent.
It is, and it's that's being played upon.
Because no matter the elites won't have power unless we give it to them. And if we're good with our own soul, we're good on an internal level, and we have peace in our own hearts. We're never going to have total peace because we're human. We're going to make mistakes. But if we have an ongoing, like, relative sense of peace in our own hearts, and then that extends out to our family and to our community, they're not going to be able to exploit us. But because we have our own demons, so to speak, our own unresolved conflicts, our own desires that are manipulated, whatever sin or vice you want, now you can get. It's at the access of your fingertips. You want to look at the worst porn short of the illegal brand, you can find it. You want drugs, you can go down the street and get it. Whatever way you want to destroy yourself and the people around you, someone will sell it to you. And somebody's making money off of it somewhere along the line. And
You're right. People are being exploited, and time is ticking away. And in a minute, I want to get into.
Yeah, finish what your thoughts were. I didn't mean to
No, I mean,
hijack that.
no. You didn't hijack it. It's a discussion.
But I know there were some really specific like things that you wanted to reference. I think that you had told me before. So
Yeah, and I've covered quite a bit of that stuff. Once again, I got momentarily distracted here, but I'm just looking through my notes because I took a lot of notes on this. But I do want to kind of move and focus on, well, what can we do? How can we avoid being manipulated in the way that we are? Because again, I really think that's exactly what's happening to us. But I want to draw a light to one more, set of quotes that I pulled before I get into my quotes for, I guess, the other side. And they were quotes by Alex Jones of InfoWars. And on his show, a lot of times what he says is the answer to 1984 is 1776. And
mm,
there's another one that bothers me too, is it says standing up to tyranny is obedience to God. So, I mean, you're really playing on enticing people. Get your rifle, get ready, war is coming, and stand up for it. And people are buying into this, and we're fighting each other instead of saying how can we fix this, how can we move on. People are being prepared, and when you sit and plan and prepare, you're going to manifest that. That's what you're doing. You're manifesting that. What if everybody, instead of taking all this time preparing for battle, I'm not saying don't prepare to defend yourself. I'm a big advocate of that. But you need to be doing something else. And I think if you want to really another indicator that this is actually happening, that people are being misled and played in order to keep us divided, in order to keep us fighting, look at the people who tried to break that system. Okay, let's look at Gandhi. Okay, he said, "You must be the change you want to see in the world." Then he also said, "An eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind." Gandhi was notorious for promoting nonviolence. Don't fight. Let's find a way to coexist peacefully. What happened? In 1948, he was assassinated. Then let's look at John Lennon. His song, he said, "Imagine all the people living a life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one." Then he went on to say, in an interview, he said, "Our society is run by insane people for insane objectives. I think we're being run by maniacs for maniacal ends, and I think I'm liable to be put away as insane for expressing that. That's what's insane about it." And then the last thing he said, not the last thing, but another thing he said that I think is relevant to this, he says, "If everyone demanded peace instead of another television set, then there'd be peace." And that speaks volumes to the American people. What happened to John Lennon? In 1980, John Lennon was assassinated. And the last one I want to reference is Martin Luther King. He was big on nonviolence and peaceful protest, and he said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." And then he went on to say, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend." And he's absolutely right. What happened to him? He was assassinated in 1968. You got these people that are out there saying the answer to 1984 is 1776, standing up to tyranny's obedience to God, get your weapons, get your bullets. Nothing happens to them, but these people that are sitting there saying, "You know what? Don't hurt anybody. Let's find a way to get along." What's happening to them? They're the ones that are being killed. That should really bells and whistles should be going off in your mind right now as to why. Okay, don't believe the hype. Stop following the hype. We need to find something different, a peaceful way. At the end, if everybody would just live by a principle, I'm going to live my life, do what I want, but I'm not going to hurt anybody or anything. And that includes the environment, that includes animals, everything. Find a way to produce the minimal amount of harm and inconvenience to everything around you. It's not easy to do. That's how I try to live my life. And every time I throw something in the trash, I'm stressed out about it. Should this be
me too.
recycling? Should I have bought this? But I'm growing and I'm learning better ways to live more in harmony with my fellow man and my environment around me. So I know I got a little fired up about all that, but we really need to see that we're being played. I mean, think about it. If this conspiracy theory is true, and there really is a secret government that's thousands of years old, don't you think that, and this has been planned for thousands of years according to conspiracy theories, if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, I'm not saying it isn't, if that's true, then why all of a sudden are we now finding out all their secret plans? Do you really think all of a sudden they just screwed up and we figured it out? If they control the media, why is all this stuff on the internet and on TV? We're not doing that so well now and uncovering stuff. It's out there because they want it out there. It's deception and denial. It's an intelligence tactic. You feed people a little bit of truth to get a desired result. You know, David Icke talks about it all the time. Problem, reaction, solution. You're going to give people a problem. Well, in this case, telling them the truth about what's really going on, get them riled up, and then, oh, we'll step in and we'll fix it, or we'll do what we need to do. Again, you watched it happened in Libya. People are rising up, and the government's fighting against their own people. We need to step in and bomb them. Like that's the stuff that's going on around the world, and I'm afraid that that's starting to happen here. And if we stopped fighting and started saying, hey, how can we coexist? How can we get along peacefully? It'd be a whole different ballgame. The street is not the place to have that discussion. Step back and find something productive to do.
To kind of jump off of that, we had talked about this like before we got on the air about how it's like the conspiracy judo. It's the powers that be doing judo. In other words, they know that people are going to get riled up. So it's like the bullfighter, like enticing the bull with the red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Like get them going in this direction, and they'll sputter themselves out.
Right.
And the key difference I'll give you between Gandhi and Martin Luther King and the current like set of protesters. Now, I don't know. Like, for all I know, there could be a core, like an actual like set of demands that a lot of these protesters have. But if they have it, it's not most of them who are actually following it, and it hasn't. And if they have it, the media isn't reporting on it.
Right.
Because what Gandhi and Martin Luther King both did is they were peaceful, but they did take to the streets and use demonstrations. But
yes,
they had specific goals,
yes,
and they had specific demands. Gandhi wanted the Brits out of India, which he succeeded. Martin Luther King wanted the end to these horrible laws in the South,
right? And
he achieved them as well. Whereas, what do these people want? Like, do they want police cameras? Yeah, I support police cameras too, but how about ending the drug war?
Yeah.
How about like moving to decriminalizing or even legalizing a lot of these drugs and moving towards treatment programs and harm reduction programs that'll take so much pressure off the police,
right?
So that they won't have to be responding to these types of things. They could be dealing. Yeah, I mean, drugs are going to cause violence and theft because that's the nature of drug addiction. But you respond to that rather than trying to interdict it way ahead of time.
Yep, you're absolutely right. You know,
but I don't see them demanding that kind of stuff. I see them demanding to treat people fairly. Like, in other words, we want color blindness, and I mean that's a fair goal. But how do you go about achieving that? Like, what is your
it's possible, you know, that'll have to do with your hiring and your training and things of that nature. But, you know, I think they need more. I think this needs to be more thought out. It was the same thing with the Occupy movement. It's like that you know, I was laughing at that because it's like, well, okay, you're supposed to be protesting, you know, the top 1%, which, hey, great idea, but your execution of that was, well, we're only allowed to protest in this area, so we're going to go over here because it doesn't inconvenience anybody. Well, really? Who's planning this stuff, in all honesty? You know, and that's the same thing I say here. When you're taking the streets, when you're blocking traffic, what's your goal? Is your goal to just spread awareness? Okay, we got the people's attention. What are you going to do with that attention that you have right now? You know, when it comes to the point when they're shooting tear gas at you, you really need to think about, is this worth it? What do I want out of this? Because if you want a more peaceful society, violent conflict is not going to bring that about. It's not. And if it does, do you really want to build that peaceful society on violence? In my opinion, no, you don't. You know, and I'm not saying there's never a need for violence. I'm not saying there's never a need for self-defense, you know, but I think that need is enacted more often than it is necessary in this day and age. And our emotions are raw right now. We're upset, you know, and on so many issues, and that's being used to, you know, you want to go out and you want to fight when you get mad like that, you know.
And I think just came to me right now, like, and we had talked about this with other people. We talked about go say hi to a stranger, and you had talked about like talking to cops in your neighborhood, like, like even the most corrupt, or I don't know, cop with the worst attitude who's just on a power, whatever the mythology is, and I'm sure there's some kernel of truth to that mythology. There are some representatives of police who are like they get the reputation they were picked on, or they were nerds, so then they became cops, or they're power tripping, or they're racist, which is possible too.
Right.
But even them, they're human beings, and even if you're not going to get them to like change their entire character, it's hard for somebody to brutalize you when you know who they are. You talked about that with getting to
Yep.
know the students and the students' families and the
Yep.
people in the community where you
Make
served
it
as a
personal.
teacher.
Yep.
So I see, and once again, like I understand, like I empathize with a lot of the anger, and maybe this is being that's weird because I see the media maybe siding with the protesters, but maybe on the other hand they're also trying to defame them. I don't know, but I see these
They're playing
snapshots.
both sides, man. They're playing
Yeah,
both sides.
I see these snapshots of these cops who are just there for riot control and people cursing at them, pointing their fingers at them, and then throwing barriers at them, and then laughing and gleefully like reveling in the fact that they just injured a police officer.
Yep.
That's what I'm seeing. Like
Because they've been dehumanized, and they've been demonized right now for doing the job that, you know,
dehumanizing people that dehumanized you is not the answer. In other
right.
words,
But society demanded that police officers come in and nobody else is willing to go do that job right now.
yeah.
So now when it's not going the way you want it, well, what are you doing? And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Like there's a lot of stuff going on with homelessness, and the police they kept locking up the 90-year-old guy who kept feeding the homeless.
Yeah.
Which I think is an absolute disgrace. And as a cop, I would never do that. But
And they reversed that.
right, they did reverse it, but and I'm glad that through spreading awareness that was able to be overturned. But it's so easy to get mad and to be an internet activist or to go out and stand on a picket line. But the real revolution is not on the streets at that level. The real revolution is, in my opinion, what we do here at Service to Change is those small changes. There's a problem with homelessness. Start a community garden and feed the homeless from that garden. Make the homeless a part of that garden. Allow them to tend to it, and then they can, work at the garden and eat the food there. They can take the food, they can sell it. I don't know. That's just one thing I'm thinking about. Build a community. Go volunteer. Volunteer at a hospital. Volunteer at a school. Volunteer to be a mentor or a big brother or a big sister. And rebuild your community from the inside. Stop. What you're doing is you're mad at authority for abusing its power, but then you keep asking authority to fix it. Well,
I was just about to say that. That's kind of like what Brian Barr had said on that last show, where we're so used to our solutions being packaged,
right?
Everything being delivered to us, wrapped up in a bow, because
right.
everything's been standardized. So it's like, do we really expect the federal government to fix a problem of local policing?
Right.
Like you're asking like the institution that is the embodiment of power to go and
right.
I mean. They can be a check against it, obviously, because that's what happened in the South. Like the feds had to defend
right.
minority black people against local corruption. But that being the only solution, even in the solution in this, I mean, Obama just said only thing he said was there's black people that don't trust cops. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's all he said.
Right.
And we need some. I'll give you guys like some paltry sum for like retraining and some body cameras, and that's it. And that's it.
And when you go to a politician for help, well, what does a politician do? They enact laws. And people are like, oh, we don't need another law. Well, then stop going to politicians if you don't want them to make a law.
Well,
because
that's the irony of it. We're angry because the laws are being enforced badly. So what do? Have more laws?
Yeah, let's make more laws. No, let's, again, it doesn't require violence, doesn't require protest. Just start rebuilding your community and adopt that philosophy. Do whatever you want, just as long as you don't hurt anybody or anything. It's not easy to do, I'm telling you. And that's the only rule, in my opinion, that we need to live by. As long as you're not infringing on somebody else and doing them harm or the environment harm. And again, I don't do it. I harm the environment every day, not intentionally, but and there's times I have to hurt somebody's feelings or something, which I don't like to do. But when you're that conscious of it, meaning I don't want to harm someone else, everybody's working together at that point. Or even if you're working to serve your own interests, you're not working to infringe on the life of somebody else or impact it negatively. And I think we really need to, that's where the change needs to be. That's the true revolution, and that's what people are getting killed for when they start having ideas like that. That's why people are getting in trouble when they're starting to build their own gardens and they're enacting laws to shut those down. That's where the revolution and the change needs to be. Not to the streets. Stop listening Stop watching the media. Stop listening to programs that are telling you, standing up to tyranny's obedience to God. Are you freaking like when I heard that one, I was like, are you freaking kidding me with this? So now you're playing on people's religious beliefs and telling them you need to go fight in the holy war. Basically, is what that comes down
Yeah,
to.
that's very dangerous.
You're being played, and and if you don't believe me, I want you to take a closer look at all these conspiracy theories and ask yourself why all of a sudden is this information being released, and why is it being released in this fashion, and why, and explore what I talked about tonight in your head. Brainstorm it. What would happen if we did X, Y, Z? That's not violent. That's just enhancing our communities and stuff, things of that nature.
And in defense of some of the people who I've been critical of, who are kind of reactionary against police and kind of I don't want to say pro-black, but they seemed like really focused on black people saying things like Black Lives Matter, which that quote can be problematic the same way Alex Jones's quote can be problematic. Because it says a lot of, it says, there's things that it doesn't say that it says, so to speak. It implies a lot. But the one thing in terms of what you were talking about, having this kind of like care, like this kind of like treating everything as sacred, even like the things you buy and how you dispose of it, there is a positive takeaway, I think, from this idea that Black Lives Matter and from some of the protests is that this, and the thing we had talked about this too before the show, there is a little bit of ignorance about what police are permitted to do already and how dangerous the job is. But with all that being a side note, I mean, and it's not a side note, it's important, but I do admire the sentiment that is kind of, I think, asking police to try to, and I think most of them already do, but to try to take the lives of the people that they come in contact with in these violent situations that can turn violent. I mean, like you were talking about, don't harm somebody, and the one caveat I would put to that is that you have situations where in order to prevent somebody from possibly harming someone else, you kind of have to harm them, if that makes any sense. Like you have to restrain them and put them in jail, which is a form of harm. So how do you balance that need with the need of that person, like not knowing this guy was asthmatic, he's 300 pounds, he's saying I can't breathe, like I don't know, like you had your own opinions, I had my own, I don't know about the answer to that specific situation, but the idea, a request for people to take other people's lives more seriously and with more care, I think
that's just it.
Can be a positive takeaway from all.
And I think that and I wasn't there with that, and I'm not even going to speculate on that because there's so many different ideas and things floating around. And at the end of the day, I always say there's three sides to every story. His side, her side, and what really happened. So I'm not even going to speculate on that or share my thoughts or opinions on it. But I'm not saying you're never going to have to harm somebody, but your goal should be to not have to.
Sure. That's
but
a great distinction.
As a veteran, as a former cop, I understand there is times you need to be ready to throw down, and I highly encourage you to be. We did a show on self-defense, and our biggest part of self-defense was avoidance. But when it comes time to throw down, you need to be ready. But I think that those out there that are listening to this show, you need to really pick and choose your battles carefully and say, is there another way? Even if it's a longer way.
Sure.
Is there a way that this can be win-win? Or am I going to create a continual enemy that now I constantly have to defend myself? Or can I make an ally? Or can I just make somebody we're going to have a mutual agreement to disagree? And we're just about out of time on our show. I'm going to bring up one more, quick point in looking at comedians and the things that they do. They are able to take the most racially offensive topic and make it hysterical. And I'm not saying let's sit around and start telling racist jokes. That's not my point at all. Sometimes you got to step back and find the humor in a situation and find a way to come to it from a positive place. They bring to light real issues, in a way that's easy for people to digest and swallow. Like I used to listen to Chris Rock a lot, and he talked about a lot of things where I'd be like, wow, that it got me thinking about things, white and black issues, and he presented it in a way where I wasn't on the defense. Or Dave Chappelle when he does he does these bits where he's making fun of your stereotypical white people. That's not me. That doesn't reflect me at all. But I laugh my rear end off every time I see him do that, because it's funny. So my point is, there's other ways besides direct confrontation to bring these things to light, to spread awareness, and then to do something about it. And that's what we need to start doing, is thinking outside that box and stop being led. Bill Cooper coined the term sheeple, and I challenge a lot of these people who claim that they're awake. I think you're waking up into another dream, and I think you're still being led toward a revolution. That's not necessarily what's needed. Not a revolution of violence, a revolution of thought, a revolution of culture, a revolution of society, yes, but it does not have to come to violence. But the clock is ticking. That's going to be my final thought until I close out the show. Anything else for you to say, Joe? We
I
got
would
about a
just
minute
say
left.
that, I've said this at my place where I go to get my help. I've said, because we talk about having a spiritual awakening,
Mm-hmm.
and I one time it just came to me, but it made sense, was that you can have an awakening, but you can fall back asleep.
You're absolutely right.
So awakenings require maintenance. Like, think about the beginning of your day. Like, you got to be active, or you'll want to go take a nap. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
you got to keep your wits about you. Like, it's not just a one and done phenomenon. It's not just instant salvation. Oh, I'm awake now, because the world's constantly changing and there's constantly new challenges emerging.
And no matter what in life, you're going to have to work at something. I'd rather work at staying awake and staying positive and productive than defending my family, fighting tyranny, and all that stuff. So you're going to put the work in. It's just, is it work that you want to do, or is it work that you're being forced to do? The choice right now is up to us. We really have that power. But when you start following the crowd, that's when it becomes a problem. They're being pushed in a certain direction, and when you step back and look at the bigger picture, that's what you're going to start seeing. People are being led. Again, ask yourself, why is this flooding the media right now? Because that's what they want.
And be careful. I'll just add this one last point. Be careful of arguments that say that you're either for us or against us.
Yep.
That's a classic propaganda tactic.
Yep.
I'm totally empathetic towards these people that are protesting, but that doesn't mean I agree with their tactics or even a lot of things they're saying, because a lot of times I don't think that they've fully acquainted themselves with all the complexities of the issue.
My approach at Service to Change, the way I design it, the way I try to carry and compose myself, with my show, with my articles, is number one, I try not to offend people. I'm honest, I speak the truth, but I try not to, especially with everything that's going on, being that I'm a former cop, but I also have ties now to these citizens who interact with the police on a daily basis. I try to be a neutral party in the sense that I want everybody to come on board and listen to what I have to say, and to support the show and to contribute to the show. So I don't want to take a side in that aspect. So if you're going to tell me you're either for me or against me, I'm going to say I'm just not with you.
Yeah,
period.
Exactly.
That's how I handle sales. Like, if a car salesman comes in and tries to pressure me to buy a car, sorry, I don't respond well to that type of pressure. I'll do my business somewhere else. It's the same thing here. Don't fall for the pressure sale. You made a very good point, Joel. All right, I gotta wrap up the show. We're 1 minute over an hour, so good
really?
discussion.
Wow.
No, yeah, so good discussion to our viewer out there. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. I know Joel greatly appreciates it. Please share our link once it's up. For this Changecast. You can get our show on iTunes. You can get it at servicetochange.com/changecast. Where you can get it on YouTube on my YouTube page. Follow me on Twitter, Dennis Nappy II, Nappii. You can subscribe via RSS feeds, Facebook.com/Service of Change. And another great way to stay connected, go to servicechange.com. Please subscribe to our newsletter. Also, check out the Haikus Day link at servicechange.com. Great things coming out. A lot of what I've been talking about with Lori Latimer's book. She's got some inspirational haikus. They're quick. It's quick and easy to read, but it might give you that motivation for the day, to go out and make that difference, or just be the best you can be, or to be that change. Also, check out, our friend Keith Green's page. It's also located on the right-hand side of your screen if you're watching live, yourgreenamerica.com. And check out the article that he just wrote about, the Fed and the banks. It's a well-written article, and he's got a video blog attached to that explaining that in even further detail. Please check it out. He's done some good stuff there. So, thank you for listening. I greatly appreciate it. Please continue to spread the word and spread the word of change. And remember that small changes among the masses can have a massive impact around the world. Be that change. Thank you.